Joel Griffin is running in a Democratic primary for the 27th Virginia Senate seat. The primary is on June 20th. Early voting has been going on since early May. Mr. Griffin joins us now to talk about his campaign. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks again for having me.
So I want to start with your background about who you are as a person and your family, and how you became a political candidate. So tell us about yourself.
Well, sure. My name is Joel Griffin. I grew up in a small town in North Carolina. My parents, my father was a mill worker. My mom worked in the sewing mills of North Carolina until they were closed in the early '80s, and those jobs were shipped overseas. So, like a lot of people, my family lived paycheck to paycheck. I spent a lot of my free time either playing sports or at the public library, and those two things sort of form the basis of who I am as an individual. Graduated from high school and volunteered for the Marine Corps. In the Marines, I had the opportunity to serve for the Marine Corps Honor Guard, where I was a member of the Silent Drill Platoon in Washington, D.C. I was fortunate enough to secure a security clearance, went on to do some intelligence work, and then after the Marines, became a government contractor. I also used the GI Bill from the Marine Corps, first generation, to go to college, and I really was fortunate that that program existed for me to be able to attend Penn State University, where I got my degree in international politics in 3 years. Later, I went on to government contracting, and met my wife, who was a school teacher in Stafford County, and we settled in the area. And like a lot of people, we raised our kids, two daughters, in our public schools, and they had a wonderful experience with Stafford community, Parks and Recs, and so on. So we really enjoyed that.
You have been married for how long?
We recently celebrated 25 years.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's
you so
a
much.
milestone worth celebrating. And your children, you have two of them. What are their ages?
So Gwyneth is my oldest. She would have been 24, but she passed away in 2012. And Ainsley is our youngest, and she is 20 and can't wait to be 21 this August. So she's excited.
And there's some history there with Gwyneth, with getting Gwyneth's Law passed. Can you briefly tell us about that?
Yeah, so unfortunately, Gwyneth suffered a cardiac arrest while she was at school, and for a variety of reasons, she didn't receive CPR in an ample time period. And so, after about 7 weeks at VCU in Richmond, Children's Hospital, we lost Gwyneth, and because of that, we were able to do so much and learn so much to repair her heart and her organs, but she passed from what's called an unrecoverable anoxic brain injury, which means she did not receive enough oxygen to her brain following her collapse. So Jennifer and I, my wife, went on to actively pursue legislation in the General Assembly, and in 2013, we were able to pass what is now called Gwyneths Law, which requires CPR training for all of the teachers in our public schools and for all of the high school students before they graduate. It is a graduation requirement. And then we've continued to work with the legislation. As recently as this January, we worked with Senator McPike to pass some amendments to Gwyneth's Law, which now not only requires defibrillators or AEDs in all of the public schools, it also allows for additional funding to so some of those more socioeconomically or rural areas that might not have access to the funds for a defibrillator, they can now apply to the state to get a grant.
Then tell me again how many years you spent in the Marine Corps. How long were you in?
I was in the Marines for 8 years. I volunteered for the infantry, and then was selected for, like I said, the Marine Corps Honor Guard, and then ended up doing intelligence in Quantico. That was my last duty station.
And how old are you?
I'm 49.
49. Very good. Let me ask you my first question. It involves school choice. There are those who say that there's no way that a school can or should compete with another school within the same public school district for resources, for students, for funding. And then there are those in the wake of the learning loss that we've seen through COVID and the lower SOL scores that have dropped dramatically since 2019 that say parents pay the bills, they fund the public schools, and in that regard should say what school their children should go to. So should the money follow the student, or should the money go to the school building to fund the school? Where do you stand on school choice?
For me, I think public schools are the great equalizer in our society. A well-educated society is what makes a democracy function. And so for me, taxpayer money goes to public schools and making sure that the students and the teachers have the resources that they need. It's been an interesting transition to 2 years ago during COVID, when teachers were our heroes. Teachers were doing everything possible. They were doing everything out they could to make sure that students were still being educated in a remote way, which has never been done before. And here we are today, where we're talking that teachers are not performing as well as they should. That test scores are down. I think that teachers, and being married to one, I have to be sure I make this clear. Teachers are doing the best that they can. They're very well educated. They work very hard in their jobs, and it's been interesting to me to see parents say that they don't have any voice in the schools, when the reality is they've always had a voice. You've always had the option as a parent for your student, for your child, to say, I don't want them to watch a video, or I don't want them to take that class, or I don't want them to read that book. And they've had that option, and that option still exists. So I think, we need to make sure that the teachers and the education that we are providing is not only well funded, but also we ensure that the curriculum is being managed well, so that we are teaching for the 21st century. We try to teach a lot of material in a very condensed time frame. We have really not updated our school system in probably 40 or 50 years. And so as the next state senator, the schools, funding the schools, making sure that teachers are defended, that's something that I fully intend to do.
And when you say defended, can you expand on that? What do you mean by defended? From attack? From attacks from parents who may not agree with what's being taught, or the way classes are held, or from politicians. What do you mean?
Well, a couple of things. I think first, the right has really pushed this critical race theory as a way to sort of divide our school systems, and I will tell you. Teachers aren't teaching critical race theory in the public schools. That's a collegiate level course that's taught in a philosophical program. It is not something that's taught in our public schools. And so using that as a way to divide people in our own communities is something that we need to get away with. The other thing is, when I say defending, I mean quite literally stopping people from burning books. To Kill a Mockingbird and to say that that's not something that should be on the school shelves seems absolutely absurd. That is one of my all-time favorites, and really is reflective of who we are as a society and how far that we have come. And so for us to be able to say, children need to have access to libraries. They need to have access to the information that's in those libraries. Education is the key to success. And it is the path forward. And then lastly, in my Senate district specifically, I want to make sure that teachers are fairly compensated. The state gives additional funding to our localities further north of us. And in our district, which is Stafford, Fredericksburg, and Spotsylvania, we're competing with those northern districts every single day. So I want to make sure that I'm going to be an ardent supporter and fighting for additional compensation for the teachers so that we can remain competitive. And those people who have 4-year degrees, master's degrees, those people who live in our community, they're also starting to teach in our community.
Yeah, one of the things that the Stafford Board of Supervisors says is they want the COCA money, the cost of living, and they have petitioned the governor's office to consider including Stafford County into sort of what Northern Virginia already gets is higher cost of living for its teachers, and so we're waiting for that. Will you aid the board in that effort if you're elected to get more money for COCA raises? Petition the governor for that.
Not only will I aid, but I will lead the fight for COCA. This is something that this new district represents a real opportunity to us to be reflected as a region. Gerrymandering has divided this district for years, and this is a new opportunity with a new senator to represent all of our region. And fighting for COCA is certainly something that I would put at the front of the line.
And can you put a point on the To Kill a Mockingbird? What library or school division in the district is banning that particular book?
I know in Spotsylvania County, that was one of the books that was specifically called out. There's a short list of books that was called out specifically and as being detrimental. And so a very small faction of parents had a very loud voice in Spotsylvania County, and to the point where there was strong consideration given to closing libraries altogether. And let me be clear, as a parent who had children in public schools, parents have a voice. They have every opportunity to speak with their teacher, to call their school, to speak with the principal. If there's something that they're unhappy with, they certainly should have that voice, and they have that voice today. But when a very small but radicalized group of people try to defray the public school system overall, that's something that I think we need to pay attention to.
I want to switch gears now and ask you about public safety. Since 2020, since the death of George Floyd, we've heard from police departments and sheriff's departments in our region, and from frankly departments across the nation, that say it's never been a more difficult time to be a police officer. More and more have been put on the shoulders of these law enforcement officers. In our area, in response, we've seen in Stafford County and in Prince William County, those jurisdictions raising the starting pay of incoming officers and deputies by about $10,000 to recruit and retain existing officers, to try to keep them employed. But again, with the more and more being placed on their shoulders, we've seen mental health cases. Mental health is now an issue that officers deal with on a daily basis. And we've seen some restrictions that some officers have complained about put in since 2020 here in Virginia, such as probable cause. I mean, if you see a light with a car without a headlight, that's no longer probable cause enough to stop somebody to see what else they may have going on with them, and some have said that's a deterrent to effective law enforcement. So, if you're elected to the Senate, what will you do to ensure that those who want to serve and protect can do so adequately?
Well, I will say that I have very close personal friends of mine, men and women that I served in the Marines with, who are law enforcement officers. So let me first say that I commend them for the work that they do tirelessly day in and day out, defending our streets and making sure that everyone is safe. But I would go one step further and to say that we need to be pragmatic and understand that within any organization, there's a percentage of people who are not adhering to the rules, not following policy. And in those instances, we need to root that out and we need to address it. And so I would say the first thing that I would do as a senator is to make sure that groups are coming together and having communication. As a business owner, if we were having negotiations, we didn't negotiate with one group in one room and another group in another room. We had all the parties come together to talk about how we can improve things. And I think, the culture from the Republican Party has been to divide and conquer, to create, segments of our society where organizations, community partners can't work together. I'm the complete opposite. I want to make sure that if there are issues, that all of the parties who have a voice should come together and communicate. So that includes bringing additional mental health resources to our police officers. Just like with school teachers, I think police officers are under a tremendous burden of having to be all things to all people. And we need to make sure that in our schools and on our streets, as well as within our community, that we have the resources necessary, whether that's counselors, whether that's mental health facilities with access to beds, whether that's resource officers that can deal with instances so that police officers can, transition to other emergency situations and hand it off to someone who's properly trained. This is something, mental health in our nation is something that we don't really talk about. It's sort of swept under the rug. It's marginalized. And I think, any number of individuals in our society should feel it's okay to talk about, needing counseling or needing therapy to deal with, the dilemmas that they may be facing. And so once we recognize it and accept it, that people need services, we also need to make sure that those services are provided, particularly for those who are representing our communities, our teachers and our first responders.
You have an opponent in this Democratic primary on June 20th, Ben Litchfield. He's been in the Stafford County area for a long time, since 2014. And so the voters will decide who they want to represent them. So as we wrap up here, please tell us why you're the candidate, you're the choice, and for this primary election, and also tell our listeners, viewers, readers, how they can find more information about you and your campaign.
Well, I think, again, you can go to joelgriffinva.com and you can get more information about us from our website, any of our social media channels. What it boils down to is experience. I've been here since 1999, and since then I have worked with the schools. I've been involved with a number of different career and technology programs within the public school system. I've served on the boards for Germanna Community College, Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, the Chamber of Commerce. I'm currently the Stafford chairman for Economic Development Authority. I have started several businesses here in the region, as well as a nonprofit. All of that experience means that I have the ability and the understanding of being able to work within our community, understanding all of the opportunities that our community affords, but also all of the legislative and legal processes that go into making things work. So that experience leadership is what I plan to bring to bear in Richmond in November. I think that is the fundamental difference between myself and my opponent. We agree on a number of policy areas, but what it boils down to is, can we win in November? Do we have the right candidate in order to take on the Republican opposition? And can we defeat them and make sure that we stand firm in the Senate with another blue brick? And so this is critically important. When we talk about defending a woman's right to choose, when we talk about defending our schools, when we talk about defending voting rights, when we talk about continuing to maintain a strong economy here within this region, this is something that I fervently will do. I already know how to do. When I was in the Marines, I swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So I take the threats that our democracy faces very seriously. I want to make sure that I serve our constituents in a way that my experience can immediately have an impact come December when we go to session.
Joel Griffin is a Democrat running in the Democratic primary for June 20th, 2023. Early voting's been going on since May 5th. It always seems like there's always some sort of early voting happening in Virginia, but this is the one that we're in right now. So, Mr. Griffin, thank you for coming on and talking to us about your campaign today. Good luck to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.